Misfits, before we jump into today's episode, I want to share something very special with you. After hosting over 450 episodes of the Misfit Entrepreneur and sitting down with some of the world's top founders, investors, and high performers, I started to notice something. Different industries, different backgrounds, different paths, but the same patterns kept showing up. So I distilled those patterns into a short, powerful guide called The Misfit Code: 21 Uncomfortable Truths from 450 plus entrepreneurs. This isn't motivational fluff, it's not theory, and it's definitely not the recycled advice that you hear everywhere else. In fact, it's a fast-paced, practical playbook that you can read in one sitting and then apply immediately to help you execute better, raise your standards, break through to your next level. And if you know you're capable of more, or you feel like you've outgrown where you are, or if you're tired of knowing what to do but not executing consistently, this guide was created for you. You can download it for free right now by going to misfitentrepreneur.com/truths. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/truths. Grab the guide, read it in one sitting, and then come back and work through one misfit truth per day. All right, with that said, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, Misfit Entrepreneurs. It's Dave Lukas. Welcome to another solo episode with me of the Misfit Entrepreneur. Excited for this one today. It goes into something that I think is an extremely important topic for everyone, for their life, for their business, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And I think it's something that will kind of stick with you and help you really think about some things too. Before we jump into this, though, if you are new to watching us on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button below. Give this video a like and comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible. All right, so let me ask you a question. What if the reason you haven't hit your biggest goal isn't so much your worth ethic or your strategy, maybe not even your market if you're an entrepreneur? What if it's that you're unconsciously arguing with yourself? Let that sit for a second. What if it's that you're unconsciously arguing with yourself? One part of you wants to dream, another part of you fears the cost. And, here's kind of the truth of that, right? After interviewing over 450 entrepreneurs and doing a lot of self-study, right? One thing stands out with world-class entrepreneurs: the subconscious always follows the stronger part. So what I want to do in this video is really kind of break down a framework that's been going viral more recently that I've seen. It's built on the ideas of Carl Jung, famous psychologist. And it's about why most people never get what they want. And you've heard me say, if you watch this, most people don't get what they want because they don't know what they want, right? But there's a simple 10-day practice to fix that. And so I want to translate that into entrepreneur terms, because it isn't, woo woo or any of that type of stuff. It's actually it's an operating system that, needs to be underneath everything you execute. So let's jump into this. All right. So as I said, today's kind of a solo episode on this. It's more of a mindset episode, but stay with me because I want to make it as practical as can be. Right. So I came across a thread on X, and I've seen a few of these, but this one stood out, and it was credit to the Elevating Mind on X. And, I will put a link to that in the show notes and everything. And it lays out what it calls Carl Jung's method for making wishes come true. Now, full transparency, Jung never wrote like a 10-day wish protocol. That part's kind of like internet packaging, right? And, marketing and trying to sell you to watch or read people's posts. But the ideas underneath it, those are real, they're powerful, and they're so powerful that I built, really part one of the Misfit Entrepreneur execution playbook really around one Jung quote, right? Unless you make unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So sit with that for a second. The things that you call bad luck, bad timing, the market, I'm just not like a salesperson, whatever it is. Jung would say a lot of that is your unconscious running the show while you call it fate. And Jung also had or said something else that really highlights this. And it's what you resist not only persists, it controls your life from the shadows. So here's the entrepreneurial translation, I guess, is most people pretend that they want less because wanting more feels dangerous, right? Admitting that you want to build a multi-million-dollar business means admitting that you could fail at building a multi-million-dollar business. So instead, people hedge. They say, I just want to make a little extra income. And they shrink the goal so that fear shrinks with it. And the result is that the mind stays divided, and a divided mind just cannot execute. So Jung didn't believe in quote unquote manifestation the way like social media sells it, and some of the hype books and stuff like out there. He believed that most people never get what they want for a much simpler reason. They never clearly admit what they want, right? Like I said, most people don't get what they want because they don't know what they want. And you got to admit what you want too. The unconscious can't move towards confusion. It can only move towards clarity. So if you've listened, like I said, to this show for any length of time, that's the same thing that I've heard from hundreds of guests in different words. Like clarity is the first domino. Everything downstream, strategy, system, sales, breaks if the first domino doesn't fall. And so here's the framework. 3 steps, 10 days. And step 1 is just to name the wish clearly. So the question, that the thread poses is one of the best self-audit questions that I've really ever heard. And that is, what would I want if I stopped pretending that I didn't? Now not that sounds realistic, not what impresses other people, really like what is true, right? And I want you actually to do this. You can pause the episode if you need to for a second, but here's what I've learned building companies for 20 plus years and, interviewing entrepreneurs and just being in the game. Like most entrepreneurs are running on a goal that's been negotiated down by fear. They wanted to build something great, and somewhere along the way, they settled for keeping the lights on, and they never consciously noticed that trade that they made. So let me give you a kind of a personal example of this. When I started training for Ironman, I didn't say I'd like to get in better shape, right? That's the hedge. That's a goal designed to be unfallible. I said I'm going to cross the finish line of a full Ironman, right? So that was specific. It's scary, for a beginner. And it's true. And the moment that I named it that clearly, though, every decision got easier because I was going to cross that finish line. And unconsciously, finally, I had a target instead of like fog, right? It's the same thing in business, right? I want to grow the company is fog, but we'll pass 50,000 monthly downloads within 18 months is a target, or we'll hit, 100,000 in MRR in the next 6 months is a target, right? So fog produces activity, targets produce direction. It's that clarity. So step 1, your homework is really to just write down the real goal, right? That unnegotiated one, the one you'd name if nobody could judge for you. All right. So step 2 is where most people roll their eyes, and it's actually the most important one. Write the wish in the present tense. Not I want peace, but I live calmly. My mind is clear. Not I want to be a successful founder, but I am the kind of person who executes daily, who keeps promises to myself, who builds systems and is a successful founder. Here's why this really matters. And the thread nails it. The unconscious does not respond to desire. It responds to identity. You think about that, your subconscious doesn't care necessarily what you want. It cares what you believe you are. Your self-concept is the instruction manual your brain runs on. If your stated goal says millionaire, but your identity says I'm someone who starts things and doesn't finish, well, guess which one's going to win, right? It's the identity. It wins every single time. So, and I see this even like on the trading investing side, right? When I built my rules-based trading system that I built, the rules weren't the hard part. The hard part was that most people's identity is I'm someone who can't sit on my hands, right? A lot of successful trading is actually not trading, knowing when not to trade versus trading, right? So they have a great system on paper, but they have a divided mind at the keyboard, and the divided mind clicks the button that the system said not to click. The system didn't fail. The identity ultimately overrode the system. And that's what gets people into trouble, and why, the biggest obstacle to successful trading, and why less than 1% of day traders succeed net of fees is because the mind gets in the way. That's their biggest obstacle. And so this is also why your nervous system doesn't change from wanting. It changed from becoming familiar with a new self-image, right? So clarity matters more than positivity. You don't need to hype yourself up. You need to rehearse who you're becoming until it stops feeling foreign and it stops feeling like you're an imposter, right? Imposter syndrome is a huge thing. And, you have to keep at it until you don't feel you're an imposter anymore. James Clear says, every action is a vote for the type of person that you want to become. Jung was really saying the same thing decades earlier from the other direction. Until the unconscious accepts the new identity, it will quietly sabotage the new behavior. Gosh, that's so important. Until the unconscious accepts the new identity, it will quietly sabotage the new behavior. So, step two is that you got to take the goal from step one. You got to write it as an identity statement, present tense. I am the founder who ships weekly. I am the athlete who trains before the world wakes up. I run a business that runs without me and continues to scale and be successful. Whatever that is for you, you need to write that down. And then step three is every morning for 2 minutes, imagine that life. And here's the key distinction, not fantasies, right? Sensations, how you breathe in that life, how you move, how your body feels walking into the room, closing the deal, crossing the finish line. Why sensations? Well, because the brain learns through sensory rehearsal. And this part actually has real research behind it. Studies on motor imagery show that vividly imagining an action activates many of the same neural networks as physically performing it. It's why elite athletes have used visualization for decades. Michael Phelps is one of the most famous for that. Repetition builds familiarity. Familiarity builds belief, and belief shapes behavior. I've done this for a number of years. I've done this in, a lot of my athletic pursuits, like Ironman training. A lot of times I did it without even knowing the science. But before race day, like I had crossed that finish line in my mind. I'd rehearsed the race, like the nutrition, like how my transitions would go from swim to bike to run. And, when I would hit, when I would get that point in the run at mile 18 after, riding 112 miles and swimming 2.5 miles, like mile 18 of the marathon, if I started to hit a wall, how I would power through that in my mind, like, rehearsing all of that. Right. And so, it's the sound, it's the fatigue in my legs, the timing mat under my feet. So when the hardest miles came, like my nervous system wasn't negotiating whether I was a finisher. The question had already been answered in rehearsal. I just needed to keep going. So 2 minutes, that's the ask. Just spend more, you spend more than that on probably doom scrolling before your feet hit the floor, right? So trade that for, 2 minutes of just visualization. And then kind of the last things I want to share is like the part of the thread that really hit me hardest because it explains so much of what I've watched over 450 odd episodes of this show. Most people don't fail because they lack the ability. They fail because their inner world is divided, right? One part wants the dream, the other part fears the cost. And when desire is mixed with fear, your nervous system receives two commands at once: go and stop, right? So you stay in motion, but never in direction. This is the most precise description of the struggling entrepreneur that I've ever heard. Busy all day, right? New funnel, new offer, new tool, new pivot, motion everywhere, right? Activity, right? But activity is not accomplishment, right? So they have all that, but they have direction nowhere. And they think the problem is tactics. So they buy another course or they implement another thing, right? But the actual problem is they're unconsciously arguing with themselves. And that's why progress feels like so slow for some people. It's not bad luck. It's this internal argument, this internal struggle. So the real method isn't wishing, it's integration, making sure that your conscious desire match your unconscious expectation. Your brain cannot hold two identities at full strength. One's always going to dominate, the old you or the chosen you. And once the subconscious actually accepts the new identity, it stops resisting. It starts filtering reality differently, noticing opportunities that used to scroll past, generating new reactions, producing new outcomes. That's not magic. That's not the universe. That's alignment. That's your own attention system finally pointing in one direction. So here's your 10-day challenge. For the next 10 days, your job is really simple. Stop sending mixed signals. No more I want it, but I can't, or no more I'm ready, but not yet. Just choose one direction. Name the goal, state the identity in present tense, rehearse it for 2 minutes every morning, just for 10 days. That's it. Name the goal, state the identity in present tense, and then rehearse it for 2 minutes every morning, 10 days, right? And you'll be amazed at the difference you see. So let's lock it in, right? So, my personal misfit 3 for this episode, if you want. One, the unconscious can't move toward confusion, only clarity. Name what you actually want. The unnegotiated version or your own mind will work against you and you'll call it fate. Number two, identity beats desire. Your subconscious doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you accept as true about yourself. So write the goal as you are, not what you wish. And then three, integration is the real method. Stop sending your nervous system go and stop at the same time. A unified average mind outperforms a divided brilliant one. All right. So if this episode hit home, I've got two next steps for you. First, the free one. You can go grab the Misfit Code 21 Uncomfortable Truths from 450 plus world-class entrepreneurs. You can do that at misfitentrepreneur.com and get it there. And it's actually, you can just get it right on the website. But truth after truth in that book comes back to exactly what I'm talking about in this episode today. That inner game that the gurus skip, right? Second, if you're ready to go deeper, the Misfit Execution Playbook opens up this exact, process, right? So it has that exact quote from Carl Jung, tick it off. And part one is called Know Thyself for a reason. It walks you through making the invisible visible. So, what you truly want, what you believe, and who you're being, right? So, it's got exercises, not platitudes. It's $29, and you can get it at misfitentrepreneur.com/playbook. Do the 10 days, send me a message either at misfitentrepreneur.com, or you can, hit Misfit Entrepreneur at Podcast Misfit on X, and we'll see that and we read them. But until next time, stop arguing with yourself, go unleash your inner misfit, and thanks for watching.